Welcome to the Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up, the podcast that cuts through the noise to bring clarity to the most pressing issues in national security, espionage, and foreign interference. Each week, retired intelligence professional Neil Bisson, the director of the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network, draws on more than 25 years of service in intelligence and law enforcement to deliver insights and analysis you won't hear anywhere else. This week, Neil unpacks critical developments shaping the global landscape. From New Zealand's concerns regarding Beijing's shadow war of influence operations to Russia's relentless campaign of sabotage, to United States government revoking dozens of security clearances and terrorism charges against a Montreal teenager. For this podcast, no headline is too complex to decode. Neil breaks down the facts, provides the context, and explains why these stories matter not just to policymakers and professionals, but to every citizen of countries that value security and democracy. Whether it's the covert maneuvers of state adversaries, the rise of extremist threats, or the vulnerabilities hidden in our own backyard, you'll get the expert perspective you need to stay informed in an age of uncertainty. So stay with us as we begin this week's briefing on the shifting world of intelligence and security.
Hello, welcome back to the Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up. I'm your host, Neil Bisson, a retired intelligence officer with the Canadian Security Intelligence Service and the director of the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network. I take the training experience from over 25 years of intelligence collection and law enforcement and use it to provide you with insights and analysis of what's happening in the world of national security, espionage, sabotage, and terrorism. Whether you know it or not, these issues affect every aspect of your life, from the economy to your personal safety, travel, and business. As with every week, we have a lot to discuss, so let's get into it. For our first story, we're heading to New Zealand, where we're unpacking a major development. The national security agencies are warning that the country now faces the most challenging security environment in recent memory, with China identified as the most active and assertive threat on multiple fronts. The latest intelligence assessment paints a frightening picture. New Zealand is being targeted by covert foreign interference, ranging from espionage and critical infrastructure and institutions to cyber targeting of sensitive information. While multiple countries are of concern, China is signaled out as both capable and willing to pursue intelligence operations that jeopardize New Zealand's interests nationally. At the same time, violent extremism, especially lone actor radicalization online fueled by polarizing content, remains a pressing threat within the country. To counter these risks, New Zealand is committing a substantial investment of around $1.6 billion to bolster defense capabilities and counterintelligence. This more candid and robust public assessment marks a notable shift in New Zealand's posture, moving from cautious diplomacy to a more transparent, security-focused narrative. Previously, reports acknowledged interference and espionage by China, Russia, and Iran, but this latest iteration underscores an escalating threat environment and signals closer alignment with Five Eye partners. The emphasis on AI-enabled disinformation and extremist propaganda highlights not just traditional spycraft, but the growing importance of digital influence and cyber threats in national security. According to the Director General of Security, the deterioration of security environment has a direct impact on New Zealand's safety and security. The government has responded by planning major defense enhancements, signaling a strategic commitment to meeting the threat head-on and raising public awareness. New Zealand's new threat assessment underscores a rapidly evolving security landscape. Assertive espionage, cyber interference, and digital radicalizations are converging into an urgent national concern, particularly from China. Going forward, New Zealand seems poised to strengthen its defenses, deepen intelligence partnerships, and disrupt covert threats before they escalate. For a country that rarely sees the headlines when it comes to the world of intelligence, New Zealand is making up for lost time in this week's episode. In our next episode, we'll discuss a headline entitled, "New Zealand Soldier Admits Attempted Espionage and Country's First Spying Conviction." In a military court, a soldier pleaded guilty to attempting to share sensitive information with what he believed was a foreign intelligence operative, making him the first person ever convicted of spying under New Zealand's military justice system. The soldier admitted to trying to provide a range of military secrets, including base telephone directories, maps, security assessments, ID cards, and network login credentials, to an individual he thought was a foreign agent. In reality, That individual is actually an undercover New Zealand police officer embedded in an investigation into right-wing extremist activity following the Christchurch mosque attacks of March 2019. Upon examination of his digital devices, investigators found banned extremist materials, including a live-streamed video and manifesto of the Christchurch attacker, Brenton Tarrant. Possession of these materials is a criminal offence in New Zealand, separate from espionage charges. He initially faced 17 charges. That was streamlined into 3 key charges: attempted espionage, dishonest access to military computer systems, and possession of objectionable material, all of which he admitted. The maximum sentence for these offences ranged between 7 to 10 years imprisonment. This case marks the first espionage conviction ever achieved through New Zealand's military court system. The last comparable case, against public servant Bill Such in 1970s, was heard in civilian courts and ended in acquittal. Though New Zealand may be smaller in scale, its participation in the Five Eyes intelligence sharing network elevates its strategic importance, making it a potential target for espionage. Moreover, the presence of extremist ideology and materials within a member of armed forces signals a dual threat, both internal radicalization and external espionage risk, which intensifies the national security implications. While statements from the intelligence officials have been withheld pending sentencing, observers have underscored the case's historic status and warning value. The soldiers' involvement in extremist groups like Action Zealandia and Dominion Movement, much of which surface in court documents, illustrates extreme ideological influences within military ranks. The conviction is posed to raise concerns among Five Eye partners about the vetting systems and counterintelligence protocols within New Zealand's military apparatus. However, all of the Five Eye countries have seen their military either targeted by foreign countries or in some cases their military members become involved in terrorist-related activity, such as was the case of the Canadian Armed Forces individuals charged with ideologically motivated violent extremism just last month. This conviction marks a watershed moment, not only because it's New Zealand's first military espionage case, but also for what it reveals about insider threats and the necessity of robust counter-radicalization measures within security forces. As the sentence approaches, this case is likely to reverberate across intelligence communities, prompting a reassessment of internal security and monitoring mechanisms. For our next story, we discuss the latest development in the ongoing back and forth between the United Kingdom and the United States over digital privacy. An article entitled, "The UK has backed down on demand to access US Apple user data," Spy Chief says. According to US National Director Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, the UK government has withdrawn its request that Apple build a backdoor to encrypted user data, marking a significant shift in the encryption and civil liberties debate. The UK Home Office has issued a technical capability notice under the Investigatory Powers Act, demanding Apple provide a way to decrypt user data, even from US citizens, raising deep privacy and security concerns. Apple resisted suspending its advanced data protection feature for new UK users in response to the notice. After months of negotiation involving President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance, the UK ultimately dropped the backdoor demand. The reversal stops the UK from accessing encrypted data globally and protects US citizens' civil liberties. This request traced back to the Investigatory Powers Act of 2016, often dubbed the Snoopers Charter, which grants UK authorities sweeping surveillance capabilities. The demand to Apple was part of a broader push to expand government access to encrypted communications, triggering high-profile pushback from privacy advocates and international partners. Apple's decision to disable its advanced data protection feature highlights the tension between the law enforcement imperatives and encryption-first tech policies. Digital rights experts cautiously welcome the UK's withdrawal, noting it is a positive step but emphasizing incomplete safeguards. Some described the decision as hugely significant, but warned that the underlying legal provisions still allow similar demands in the future. Others called for legislative reform of the Investigatory Powers Act to prevent renewed overreach. This case marks a notable victory for global privacy advocacy, especially regarding the integrity of end-to-end encryption. However, the persistence of legal mechanisms enabling such demands highlights the need for enduring reform and vigilance. The outcome may influence future intelligence collaboration and shape encryption policy across digital ecosystems. Since we're already talking about national security news coming out of the United States, let's stick with it in our next story, where we'll be examining a sweeping move by the Director of National Intelligence. In an article entitled, "Tulsi Gabbard Revokes Security Clearances of 37 Current and Former National Security Officials," Gabbard cited abuse of public trust, politicization of intelligence, and failure to uphold professional standards as reasons behind the revocations. Acting under President Trump's directive, Gabbard stripped clearances from 37 individuals, including high-level intelligence officials. The memo cited involvement in the 2017 Russia-related intelligence community assessment and alleged breaches of analytic norms and classified material handling. The action forms part of a broader effort to target those perceived as political adversaries or whose past actions collided with the administration's narrative, such as officials who questioned or criticized Trump. This move is unprecedented in its scale, reflecting intensified tensions between parts of the intelligence community and the current administration. Many of those affected had publicly voiced concerns or opposition to the president, and some were directly involved in the Russiagate-era assessments. Legal and security professionals criticized revocations as politically motivated and potentially unconstitutional. Legal experts warned that publicly naming individuals without due process might violate privacy protections. Critics likened the purge to McCarthy-era tactics and warned of chilling effects on intelligence professionals. Supporters defended the move as necessary to restore integrity in intelligence work and punish those who had allegedly misused trusted positions for partisans' ends. Tulsi Gabbard's revocation of 37 security clearances marks a dramatic and divisive moment in intelligence politics. It raises fundamental questions about politicization, due process, and the future of trust within the U.S. intelligence apparatus. It also speaks to the relationship among Five Eye partnerships. Any country who has a discerning consideration of the current U.S. administration, I'm looking at you, Canada, can face a colder shoulder when it comes to collaboration and intelligence sharing going forward. As many of my listeners already know, I'm a huge advocate for Canada establishing their own Foreign Human Intelligence Service or agency. The latest decision by the U.S. administration to cancel security clearances of intelligence professionals who don't meet the politicized standards they have set is yet another example of why this needs to be a priority for Canada and Canadians. In our next segment, we turn to Ottawa, where the Public Safety Minister, Gary Ananasangari, has announced that Canada will appoint its first ever foreign interference watchdog next month. A new foreign agent registry is also expected to be launched this fall, both of which represent significant steps forward in defending Canadian sovereignty against foreign interference. Minister Ananasangari stressed that addressing foreign interference and transnational repression is a top priority for Prime Minister Mark Carney's government. He confirmed that candidates for the Transparency Commissioner role are now being vetted and will be presented for consultation with opposition parties before Parliament resumes. Once appointed, the Commissioner will oversee the creation of Foreign Agent Registry, requiring individuals or organizations working on behalf of foreign governments to disclose their activities. Ananasangari stated that his goal is to have the registry operational before Thanksgiving. The measures stem from Bill C-70, the Countering Foreign Interference Act, passed in June 2024. Yes, that's right, over a year ago. The legislation was driven by revelations of foreign meddling in Canada's democratic institutions and created both the watchdog role and the legal framework for the registry. The government's actions also follow Justice Mary Jose Ho's foreign interference inquiry, which concluded that transnational repression is a genuine scourge and signaled out that the People's Republic of China as the most active perpetrator targeting Canada. A recent investigation by CBC and the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists documented how China has increasingly targeted diaspora communities, dissidents, and activists, employing international organizations such as Interpol to pursue critics abroad. While the creation of a watchdog and registry are seen as vital steps, Minister Ananasangari's role has not been without controversy. As I've noted in previous episodes, concerns have been raised about the past actions and associations, including his support for individuals with links to terrorist organizations. Critics argue that these questions undermine confidence in his ability to lead Canada's response to foreign interference. This tension highlights a central issue. Policies are only as strong as the trust placed in those implementing them. For Canadians, credibility and leadership is critical when dealing with an issue as sensitive as foreign interference. Ananasangari has pointed to ongoing investigation into alleged foreign police stations operating in Canadian cities, calling such activities completely unacceptable. He has also recused himself of any investigations dealing with Tamil Tigers. This leads to the questions of whether a minister in charge of public safety will be willing to deal with terrorism issues or foreign interference from Sri Lanka. Despite his commitment to implementing many of the recommendations made by Justice Ho's inquiry, signaling the government's intent to reinforce Canada's defenses. The appointment of a foreign interference watchdog and the creation of a registration mark important progress in protecting Canada's democracy. Yet, the controversy surrounding the minister responsible for these measures cannot be ignored. Ultimately, the effectiveness of these tools will depend not only upon the enforcement, but also on whether Canadians believe the government leadership is impartial and trustworthy. Sticking with national security news out of Canada, our next segment dives into the troubling case unfolding in Montreal, where a minor has been charged in connection with terrorism-related offences. Canadian authorities revealed that a youth in the Côte-de-Neige, Notre-Dame-de-Grâce area of Montreal was arrested after allegedly pledging allegiance to the Islamic State and planning a major terrorist attack. The RCMP report indicates that the individual intended to procure weapons, such as AK-47s, to carry out the plot. Although the investigation began in April, law enforcement confirmed that there was no immediate threat to the public safety when the arrest was made. The charges laid against the minor include 1. Providing or making available property or services for terrorist purposes, 2. Participating in activities of a terrorist group, and 3. Facilitating a terrorist activity. This case underlines the persistent concern around homegrown radicalization and the potential for extremist ideologies to attract young individuals. The Montreal case also shows how modern extremist groups choose to try and influence vulnerable youth and try to radicalize and attempt violent action on foreign ideologies' behalf. Though Canada has faced terrorism threats before, including those inspired by far-right extremists and historically separatist movements, the more recent emphasis has shifted towards transnational jihadist influences. A recent and tangible example of this is the shift in terrorism threat profile in the case of Mohammed Shahzeb Khan, a Pakistani national residing in Canada. In September of 2024, he was arrested near the U.S. border in Ormstown, Quebec by RCMP in cooperation with the FBI. Khan had allegedly been radicalized online, openly expressing support for ISIS through encrypted social media and messaging apps since November of 2023. He communicated with undercover agents, believing them to be fellow ISIS supporters, detailing plans to carry out a mass shooting at a Jewish center in Brooklyn. He specifically planned the attack for October 7, 2024, the anniversary of the Hamas attack on Israel, and boasted it would be the largest attack on U.S. soil since 9/11. Khan had also started arranging weapons, short-term rentals in New York, and even a human smuggler to enter the U.S. before authorities detained him. He has since been extradited to the U.S. to face federal charges for attempting to provide material support to ISIS and plotting an overseas attack. RCMP spokespersons have emphasized that despite the severity of the accusations, the public was never in danger due to proactive investigations and early intervention. This case serves as a reminder of the importance of intelligence-led policing and youth-focused intervention efforts to disrupt radicalization pathways before they materialize into violent actions. This Montreal case illustrates an urgent spotlight on youth radicalization and the influence of transnational extremist narratives. The RCMP's swift action prevented potential violence and underscores the importance of community vigilance, intelligence collaboration, and early intervention strategies. For our last story this week, we end our Global Trotting Intelligence Tour in Europe, where we examine how Russia's aggression isn't limited to the battlefield in Ukraine. According to a new report from the International Institute for Strategic Studies, Moscow has been escalating sabotage operations across Europe, targeting dams, satellite navigation systems, and critical infrastructure. The Kremlin's goal? Destabilize Europe while avoiding direct military confrontation. The report highlights a pattern of Russian hybrid or gray zone attacks, hostile acts that fall below the threshold of open warfare but create serious disruption. These include cyber attacks, infrastructure sabotage, and disinformation operations designed to weaken European unity. Recent examples underscore the threat. In April, pro-Russian hackers briefly seized control of a Norwegian dam, while in Latvia, authorities tracked widespread GPS disruptions back to Russian military bases. Estonia, too, has faced satellite interference so severe that it grounded flights last year. At the same time, Russia has expanded its presence in the Arctic, mapping undersea cables and pipelines while flying long-range bombers closer to North American and European airspace than ever. These activities raise concerns that Moscow is preparing for a longer-term confrontation with NATO by probing weak spots in Europe's infrastructure. Russia's sabotage campaign intensified after NATO began supplying weapons and intelligence to Ukraine following the 2022 invasion. While the pace of these hybrid attacks peaked in 2024, officials warn that the disruptions continue and remain dangerous. Cancelled flights, exploding packages, and disrupted electricity or internet services all show how vulnerable European systems are to attack. The IISS report also criticizes Europe's lack of preparedness, pointing out outdated security systems, underinvestment, and fragmented regulations across borders. These gaps have left critical infrastructures like rail networks, pipelines, and communication systems all exposed. European officials have struggled to respond cohesively to these threats. Fears of escalating tensions with Moscow has often led governments to avoid directly blaming Russia, which the report argues only emboldens further attacks. NATO leaders acknowledge what they call Arctic blindness, a lack of monitoring in the high north that allows Russia to expand its operations unchecked. Russia's hybrid attacks demonstrate that its hostility towards Europe goes well beyond the war in Ukraine. By targeting infrastructure and exploiting vulnerabilities, the Kremlin aims to destabilize the continent and test NATO's ability to defend itself in the gray zone of modern conflict. Unless Europe invests in stronger defenses and acts with unity, Moscow will continue to see sabotage as a low-risk, high-reward weapon. But these threats are not limited to Europe. Canada has consistently shown support for Ukraine since the inception of Russia's invasion. This includes militarily, making Canada a prime target for Russian gray zone sabotage tactics. Canada's intelligence community would be well served to coordinate with European allies to collaborate and any other intelligence operations being conducted to identify and dissuade Russian intelligence actions. Well, that's going to do it for this week. As always, all the links to the stories discussed in this episode are available in this transcript of the show. As is evident in this week's episode, human spies and espionage are still a major component of intelligence collection around the world. Foreign adversaries are targeting military, security, public, and private industry members. With this in mind, I would like to remind my listeners that I am scheduled to teach more sessions on the psychology behind human sources and intelligence collection at the University of Ottawa. This course is offered through the Professional Development Institute and is provided online. So no matter where you are globally, you have access to this course, which explores the real-world motivations, challenges, and psychological dynamics that shape how human sources, or spies, are recruited, managed, and assessed in intelligence operations, both past and present. I'll leave a link in the show notes and in the transcript for anyone interested. So until next week, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.
That concludes this week's Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up. Every episode involves hours of research, analysis, and preparation to ensure you receive the most accurate and up-to-date open-source intelligence possible. Neil's insights and analysis are forged in more than 25 years of intelligence and law enforcement experience to cut through the noise and deliver the intelligence that matters. If you value this work and want to help keep the podcast independent and free from corporate influence, please visit Buzzsprout to become a sponsor or make a donation. Your support makes this show possible. And don't forget, like, subscribe, and share this podcast with others who care about national security and intelligence. It's the best way to help the show grow and reach more listeners. Thank you for tuning in. And as Neil always reminds us, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.